talk about what to write about. All right, Brian. So some people say, find out what the trend is, what's really hot, and if it's Harry Potter, write about Harry Potter. And other people say, write what you love. And I think the third choice is write what you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I guess the biggest decision you have to make is, are you writing fiction or are you writing nonfiction? Because that makes a big difference too. If you're going to write nonfiction and you know nothing about dating, that's probably a bad topic, right?
Right.
Whereas if you love science fiction like I do and you want to write fiction, then probably romance is a bad idea. But
Yeah.
what do you tell aspiring authors when it comes to like we have this whole smorgasbord of the world. There's millions of topics. How do you narrow it down to something that's manageable?
Yeah. Sometimes the intersection of all of those things happens, and that's perfect for people. I tell people that if they are looking for the perfect topic for them, they need to pick number one, what they know about, number two, what their audience wants to know more about, and number three, what will their audience pay for? Because you want them to buy your book and you want them to do things with you after they've read your book. So the intersection of those three things, I think, is the perfect confluence of the thing you need to be writing about. I don't hear you.
Sorry, I muted myself. So yeah, so I never thought about the part of you want people to want to buy your book.
Mm-hmm.
So once you've just take us through that process then. Let's say come to you, I say, you know what, Brian, I really want to write a book, but I don't know what to do. What would we do?
Well, we explore a few different options. I ask them first if they want to write something based on their current career to promote the thing that they are doing professionally, or do they want to do something that's a little more personal and write their story, or do they want to be a combination of the two? Because I think that's really, really important. I had a client recently who said, I've got ideas for 2 books. I've got one for more general audience and one for more specific audience like entrepreneurs. And I'm not sure which one to do first. And I said, which audience do you want to speak to first? And he concluded that he wanted to speak to the general audience first. I said, well, then that makes your decision really easy.
Right.
So that's the book we're doing first.
Cool. So now how do you lay out the book, right? So let's say I've decided I'm going to be writing about the general populace. So it's a personal development book, just to give you something to kind of work with, right? Like, so
Right.
It's my journey from being a schmuck to being a multi-billionaire and finding love along the way. So now where do I just say, I was born, 66 years ago and that's where I start in my book? Or how do you start designing that part?
Yeah. I think definitely there's a before and after sequence in this. That's the broad umbrella for something like that. So what is your background? What was it that you started with? What was your starting line? And where is your finish line? And what led you from here to there? I mean, basically you're proposing a problem and a solution. It's interesting. I liken this a little bit to a Shark Tank pitch. Let's just say that what you're doing is you're talking about the universal problem that needs to be met, and then you're talking about the solution to that problem, and then you're talking about why you are that solution, and then what needs to happen next.
Right.
So maybe that kind of a framework can help, but definitely setting up your expertise. Why are we listening to you? Why is it a problem? What is the solution? Why are you the one to provide that solution? And then you lay out the steps to make that happen.
Right. So do you tend to, what comes to mind is the hero's journey, right?
Yeah.
I start off, something bad, and then I go through this change and this journey, and then I have something good, right? And I often say to people when I'm talking about this topic, You never go to a movie where, Joe was born, had a beautiful babyhood, and then grew up and had straight A's in school, no problems, just really good friends, and went to college, got a job, found a beautiful woman, had his own children, got old and died. Like, nobody watches that movie, right?
Because there's no drama.
There's no drama. There's nothing,
Yeah.
going on. There's nothing to hook you. It's boring, right? And of course, it might be the ideal life, but we all know that's a fantasy, right? So you have your story, things that happen that are challenging. What are your challenges? How did you get over those challenges? And when you share that in your book and share your story, those people that have the same challenge hopefully will be attracted to that book, and you'll be able to help them.
Right. Exactly. You definitely have to create a reason for people to want to read your book. No one wants to read about your perfect journey. That is absolutely true. They want to read something that they can relate to. So if you have had certain things come up in your journey that other people also experience, then sharing that and how you got through it can be very instructional, very helpful, very educational and motivational.
Right. So, for example, someone who was bullied as a child, and I have a friend who's an author, and that's the case. He did his whole program, including his book, on how to deal with bullies and how to help your children deal with if they're being bullied and what to do. Right. So that's perfect for him because that's his experience. If he was going to write a book on teenage pregnancies or something like that, and it never happened to him, he would have a really difficult time.
Right. There has to be an authenticity to it all. Yeah. So write what you know definitely does come up. And sometimes it's helpful to have a co-author who's a little more experienced in some of the topics that you're not, if you're dealing with something like that. And it's pretty common. A lot of the big name authors do sometimes have a co-author so that they can basically tap into the other person's experience too. And sometimes there's a synergy in having a co-author.
That's a really, really good point, Brian. I'm glad that you brought that up. I hadn't thought about that, but we co-authored books together. We're working on our third one, and and there are other co-authors, not just the two of us.
Right.
And it makes for, because really writing, is there anything that's lonelier than writing?
Very few things are lonelier than that because you're putting yourself out there.
Yeah. And also, it's cliche-ish, but you've got the log cabin and the fire and the little snowflakes coming down as you're typing on your typewriter in the middle of the woods, right? Because that's the only place you can go, not be distracted, so you can focus on writing your book.
Right.
But when you have co-authors, now you have someone you can bounce your ideas off of. They can give you feedback. You have that. Hopefully, you have that synergy. The energy spirals up, and things go. So all of a sudden, and we can't see ourselves, right? So as my co-author, I'll be writing something, and we'll have had talks about it, and you'll say, what's really interesting, you never said anything about this, which I think is really fascinating. And it's, my ego subconscious or whatever doesn't want to go there. Right. So it's a blind spot for me. And then all of a sudden, oh, well, yeah, you're right. Okay. And then you shine a light on it, and then you go deeper, right? Like one of my friends who's a therapist says, when you do self-therapy, it's very easy to, you shine the spotlight on something that's ugly. Oh, oops. And then immediately shine it somewhere else, right? Yeah. But when you're with an expert, whether it's a therapist, psychiatrist, or your best friend, they don't let you get away with that, right? And then you actually have movement, you actually get deeper and heal or learn, right? Right,
exactly. No, those are all good points.
Cool. So let's switch for a second. So we've been talking really about nonfiction. And so I love science fiction. I want to write a book about science fiction. How do we decide then, and it could apply to romance, mysteries, detective novels, and all the rest of it, but where does someone decide what they want to do?
Yeah. It's interesting too. Fiction is not necessarily my wheelhouse, but I think first of all you have to find something you're passionate about. If you're passionate about science fiction, that's a great place to start. Borrowing ideas from other stories that you've seen can be very helpful. That can give you an idea of what to do, and then your task would be to figure out a way to spin it into something a little bit different. When I was in high school, I attempted to write a time travel story,
Oh.
but I wrote myself into a corner, and so I stopped. And I
It's
think
nothing.
sometimes too, when you are writing something about that, you want to talk to people who have a greater knowledge of that topic than you. I mean, for example, the people who were writers for The Big Bang Theory. They consulted with scientists on a regular basis to
Right.
determine is this storyline realistic? Is some of the things that we're talking about is that realistic? Is that accurate? And so they
Right.
had professional input into their plots and storylines based on who the characters were and what they were trying to do.
Yeah. That's
Now,
interesting.
I was going to write a novel about a telemarketing room because I worked in a call center for a while. And I never wrote this book, and anyone who's listening or watching can feel perfectly free to borrow this storyline and just take it because I will never claim a right to it because I don't have time. But let's just say, for example, you worked in a call center and somebody you contacted got so bent out of shape that they want to track you down and hold your entire company hostage, your entire call center hostage. What would happen then?
Right.
Well, I realized this would involve police and FBI expertise, which I didn't have any interest in researching. So I just let that go. If I was to do something, which I'm not going to, I would want to talk to someone who has a background in all of that, the police stuff, the legal stuff, the investigative stuff, to figure out what are my storyline options. How can I make this story realistic? What does a hostage situation look like? How do I create dialogue about that? I would probably want to talk to a negotiation expert about what does that dialogue realistically look like. So you can see
Right.
how complicated this can get, right?
I was thinking the opposite. I was thinking how exciting, you've got this burning desire to learn something,
Yeah.
and then you have a reason to be, in this case, like go into the police office and talk to the officers and hopefully find someone that's willing to sit down and answer your questions. And then of course they know somebody and they'll say, well, you
Yeah.
should talk to him or her. And,
Right.
and that whole research would be just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it can be
If you're interested.
Yes, if you are really interested in that, if you have the temperament and the time to work all that out, but you can't write what's in your head if it's not there.
Right. Right. Yeah. And if you tried to make it up, I mean, I see these YouTube videos critiquing movies, right? Where it's like Marine sharpshooter critiques whatever the name of the movie is. It was full of sharpshooters, and and when he did this, I mean, that would blow his arm off, and blah blah. So they talk about the reality versus the fantasy of the show.
Right.
But yeah, so us lifelong learners that would pick a topic and then you can write a novel about it, but then you have to go in and find, like in my case, I spent 20 years in a grocery store, so I could write a whole drama about the comings and goings of the staff and the customers and everybody in a grocery store. But if it came to a detective novel, I'd have no idea where to start, right?
Right, exactly. So if you're writing fiction, in short, you need to make sure you really, really know what you're talking about. Or
Right.
enlist the help of someone who does.
Yeah. Awesome. Wonderful. So what to write about? Write about the things that you know and like and love. Write about a topic that you're pretty sure people will buy the book,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And I think the last one is just get started writing. And
Yeah.
we're never in a vacuum, right? Like if we're thinking about, if I was going to write a science fiction novel, I've read hundreds of them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I go revisit those and what
Yeah.
did I really like about them, and then
Yeah.
where would I expand, that universe or create my own universe
Right.
to
Yeah.
do.
Now, if you're writing about something that's pretty timely, you want to write that book pretty quickly.
Right.
I mean, 6 months ago, we were all talking about Clubhouse. I don't hear anyone talking about Clubhouse anymore.
Right. Yeah, and when the president changes, there's always a biography of his that comes out right away, because
Yeah.
if you wait 20 years for the biography of
Right.
John F. Kennedy, then it's kind of like, oh, that's been done, and we're not really interested in him. He's old news,
Yeah.
and we want to know about Joe Biden now. So you're right.
Right.
Get in it. All right. So hopefully this has been helpful for you all, and start writing.